Hello everyone, my name is Mignano and I am presenting on sport and exercise psychology professionals and some of the important issues and considerations when counseling women clients. So during this presentation, I'm going to be talking about some of the background of counseling women and especially in sport and exercise psychology contexts, the societal roles and expectations of women, some of the strengths, discrimination, harassment, and victimization of women in the workplace and also within sport. Some of the educational barriers that women have faced. Additionally, economic and employment barriers, challenges that arise with intersectionality related to gender and other cultural identifications, specific issues within the field of sport and exercise psychology, considerations of mental health conditions in women, some of the gender biases that exist in therapy, counseling, and moving forward, what are some of the implications and possible strategies for clinical and counseling practice and applied research and teaching directions in sport and exercise psychology. So some of the background on counseling women. In the United States, more than half of the U.S. population is women. This ratio also tends to increase as women and men age. Women tend to live longer, and thus the ratios of women to men tend to increase. Yet women face many issues related to discrimination, biases, stereotyping, and this has all been part of a patriarchal society, which promotes prejudice and discrimination in favor of male power and oppression. This has also led to a feminist perspective, which gives voice and advocacy to issues specifically related to women and equal rights and justice. There's even been some research about specific gender differences in the past and over history. But what it comes down to are some of these environmental issues related to exclusion and underrepresentation in positions of leadership within key political, religious, and educational institutions. Some of the challenges that occur are related to societal roles and expectations of women. For thousands and tens of thousands of years, women have been objectified based on their bodies and their attractiveness. They've been sexualized, marginalized, and again, based on features such as their attractiveness. This has led to several issues related to body dissatisfaction, including disordered eating patterns. And what it comes down to is this role overload. We expect more from women than we do men when it comes to being the nurturer, the caregiver, having a career, and balancing all of those expectations. A Bureau of Labor Statistics study found that women are 2.5 times more likely to do household chores and work around the house. So balancing these societal roles and expectations is an important consideration when counseling women in sport and exercise psychology. With these high expectations and societal roles, we also find many strengths in women as leaders, as athletes, as mothers, as politicians. And some of those are acculturated qualities based on kind of stereotypes of what it means to be a woman. And some of those would be sensitivity and kindness. But also, more recent research has shown that women tend to have a better kind of idea of emotional consequences of decisions and can see those playing out. They're also better able to self-regulate. In a work environment or a team environment, they are more open and prefer a consensus building approach. And again, in those team environments, they're more cooperative, they encourage teamwork, and they don't mind sharing the power. Women have also been found to have what's kind of the ideal leadership style, which is transformational. And that is kind of building energy and leading by example and bringing positive energy into a project. So we've talked a lot about in this course and throughout this semester about discrimination, harassment, and victimization. And at the level of gender or these issues against women, we have talked about sexism and the three different types, which is overt, covert, and subtle. Overt would be, blatant sexism. Covert might be withholding information, withholding a job promotion, and subtle might be kind of that more unconscious or implicit bias that a man might give to a woman. And this can be in the workplace or it can be in the counseling context. So women have also been discriminated against, again, in political, legal, social, sport, exercise contexts. They've also been victims of sexual harassment and sexual and physical assault. Almost 1 in 5 U.S. women, adult women, have experienced rape or some type of sexual assault. And then we also have those issues related to intersectionality, and that is it could be an African American woman who is also identifies as lesbian. So keeping those in mind has led to somewhat of a victimization of women as well. So these discrimination and harassment by men in positions of power are important considerations, again, for the sport and exercise psychology counseling professional. Next, we have educational barriers for women, and some of these are due to implicit bias that can be, unconscious bias by a male, or gender stereotyping, so a woman or male specific industries or job types. Stereotype threat, where the woman may internalize these stereotypes and believe that that she cannot, become a certain professional position. Blatant, again, discrimination in the workplace, being passed over for promotions, unequal pay, which we'll talk about on the next slide as well. And then overall, just underrepresentation in STEM, so that would be science, technology, education, and math programs. And then this perpetual culture of masculinity, especially when it comes to sport and exercise and what it means to be an athlete. So many people in the United States would say that these issues related to gender and discrimination against women have improved. And while that is true, we can look strictly at the numbers and see these gender wage gaps. This is from 2018, so relatively recent data. And these numbers here on the left-hand column show what a woman of a particular race makes for every dollar that a white male makes. So for example, a white female would make 79 cents per dollar. And this is controlling for full-time, year-round work and the different types of industries as well. So we can see a Hispanic or Latino woman would make 54 cents on the dollar of a white male. So some of these economic and employment barriers are related to, as DePillis and DePillis mentioned, this notion of femininity and what it means to be feminine, and related to different job types, pursuing certain professions. But this is clear gender discrimination based on these wage gaps here. Divergent expectations, so that would be having different ideas of, again, what it means to be a man or a female in the workplace. And a good example of this would be a female leader, let's say a female politician, being criticized for being too aggressive or too outspoken, even though that's what a leader is, supposed to do at different times. So it's these divergent expectations where it's a lose-lose for the female leader. Token hiring practices, so kind of the good old boys club mentality. And then females in general and across several industries in general have less mentoring from either men, or men who can be advocates, or women mentors that can help them get into those positions. Again, there are challenges related to intersectionality, and that's how an individual identifies with different cultures and sociocultural aspects of themselves. So this is ageism. So women of uh, older women, LGBTQ issues, language barriers for maybe immigrants or refugees, women, and then women of color. We saw on the last slide that uh, related to Hispanic women and African American and Asian women, related to how much a white male would make. So intersectionality is another key consideration for a counselor. So as sport and exercise psychology consultants, we need to consider um, some of the norms that happen in sport. So heteronormativity, which is related to kind of the white male sort of privilege in sport, social identity, being more inclusive, and again challenging some of these norms if we're working with a team or an organization. Cisgender privilege, which is related to, again, the straight white male normal identity or idea. And then the citational chain, which is what led to certain decisions to be made or allowed for certain forms of discrimination or biases to be implemented. Another key consideration are mental health conditions related to some of these environmental forms of discrimination and oppression. So women are 70% more likely to deal with issues related to depression and or anxiety than men, especially women of color. Again, these intersectionality ideas. So the sport and exercise psychology consultant needs to know when to make referrals and has to have an awareness of these conditions with their clients. So again, when counseling women in sport and exercise psychology, we need to be aware of any possible gender biases during therapy. These can include stereotyping, subtle sexism, such as interrupting a man or interrupting a woman but not a man, gender-based microaggressions, diagnoses, so leading to certain diagnoses because of past situations or different stereotypes, gender bias psychological theories and how theories were formed, and also the role of the woman in family systems models. Some other key considerations of gender bias in therapy and in the workplace and sport and exercise psychology contexts are this idea that women have to prove it again, right? So you did it once, well, show us again. Walking the tightrope, again, between these role expectations, the maternal wall, so having to choose between a career and having a family, the constant tug of war or that divergent expectation, and then dealing with blatant sexual harassment, sexual assault, and physical assault. So here are some of the implications that were mentioned in the uh, Sue and Sue chapter, coming from the American Psychological Association. But again, being aware of biases and stereotypes, making modifications for women clients, staying on top of the research and best practices, being aware of a systems level approach and some of these environmental issues that led to oppression, using a strengths-based approach to our counseling, being encouraging and advocates for issues related to feminine policies and supporting those policies, assessing women for abuse, offering psychoeducation on ways to deal with these different levels of environmental discrimination, identifying some internalized stereotypes or self-blaming, consider the worldview or the context of our client. And then finally, again, related to being an advocate for feminist issues, supporting policies, and having an awareness and a knowledge of eating patterns and disorders. So thank you all for listening. Hopefully you found this informative and helpful, and I look forward to your feedback and any comments you might have. Thank you.